Hunting for a job can be a pretty complex operation, and there's multiple places that you can go wrong when you're working on a job hunt. So I'm starting a new series of videos that are going to walk you through all aspects of searching for a job, from preparation to interviews to resume building. We're going to cover it all. Before jumping into resume building, I wanted to talk about our new Discord server. I wanted to create a place where developers of all different skill levels, whether you're brand new to the industry or you're a 10-year veteran, we can all come together and share knowledge with each other. The Discord server has a bunch of different channels to discuss various things with other software engineers. We've got a dev resources channel where we have a curated list of resources for developers to look into. We've got a job resources channel where we have a long list of job resources to help you find the perfect role. We've got a channel called Ask a Senior where you can go and ask a question and senior level engineers will respond with advice. The Discord community is just getting up and running, but I've already got engineers in it who've worked at companies like IBM, Amazon, and I've even got the creator of a Git tool called GitKraken in the Discord. So if this sounds interesting to you, I'll leave a link to join the Discord down below. Thank you. If you're not finding success in your job hunt, it's important to look at your process and try to identify the area that you're going wrong. How many applications are you sending out a day? If it's low, then maybe your problem's the volume. How many responses are you getting from recruiters or applications? If that's low, then your problem's probably your resume. How many screening or cultural interviews are you getting through? If that's low, then maybe you need to work on your ability to present your past work and your soft skills. How many technical interviews are you passing? If it's low, then your problem's probably your technical interview preparation and your toy problem practice. And how are you at negotiating offers? Do you feel like you're getting bad offers and getting underpaid? Then maybe your problem is your business skills and your ability to negotiate and your ability to present your value props. This is the first video in this series, and we're going to be talking about something that all of you have done, but maybe not all of you have done well, building a resume. Before we jump in, I think it's really important to talk about what the goal of a resume is. But before we do that, I want to talk about something important to me, which is subscribing to my YouTube channel. A lot of the people that watch my content aren't subscribed. Subscribing really helps me get my videos out to more engineers who need them, and it also selfishly helps me. See, I recently quit my job at Amazon to pursue entrepreneurship full time, and I'm not taking a paycheck at the moment. I've been doing YouTube for fun, but it would be awesome if I made a little bit of money from these videos, and in order to do that, I need to hit 1,000 subscribers, so please consider subscribing to help me out. So what is the goal of a resume? The goal of a resume is one thing. See, you know you can do the jobs that you're applying for, but the recruiters or hiring managers on the other side, they don't know. So the goal of your resume is to convince those recruiters and hiring managers that you might be a good fit for the role. So throughout this video, throughout this resume building process, we're going to keep that as our North Star. Our goal is to make a resume that sells to those recruiters and hiring managers. In order to do this, we're going to be structuring our resume in a way that showcases the things that recruiters and hiring managers care about the most. And then crucially, we're going to be hiding the big detractors that might turn away potential jobs. This video is for all software engineers, and I'll have some tips for more experienced software engineers later in the video. But I think that resumes tend to be the most important for newer engineers. Engineers with more experience are likely to get responses even if they're making some mistakes on their resume. So I'm going to be going through a junior software engineering resume, a real one that I've received in the past. I've modified it so that the person who originally created it stays anonymous. I'm going to go through it and point out all of the places that the person who created this is going wrong. Then I'm going to put together an alternative version that highlights the things that recruiters and hiring managers care about the most and that I think will be much more effective in getting calls back. So here we are. We're in the resume view now. And I want to go through it and just talk about some of my initial impressions of it. So scrolling through it, some immediate things that pop out without even diving into some of the text, is that it's really plain, right? The resume is very boring. It doesn't pop out much. There's not a lot of color. And in some industries, that might be what you're going for, and something maybe a bit more formal. But in my experience, the tech industry is really receptive to personality. I mean, we're building, for the most part, applications for people to use, and generally people want them to be beautiful. So I think having a resume that is visually attractive is a good way for you to, stand out among other applicants. So that's my first piece of just advice here, and something we're going to be doing for sure in our revision is just making this pop a little bit more. It's just too boring for me, and if I was to read this resume, it certainly wouldn't stick in my head. Delving in a little bit more, I think this top section's fine. You go over your name. Honestly, in the modern age, I would recommend leaving your address off. The next thing I want to look at is how the resume is structured. So the top here we have education, then we have experience, then projects, and then skills. I think this order is pretty bad. So it's bad for a few reasons. The first is it looks like you have almost no software development experience, and the way this is structured is pretty bad as well. We'll talk about that when we're going through the breakdown of each section individually. But I think the things that are most impressive to employers on your resume are probably actually these two sections, which are at the bottom, your projects and skills. The projects are your actual development experience, and your skills here are what recruiters are going to be looking for. So I think having skills somewhere near the top, or just somewhere that's very easy to find, is really helpful. So we know we want to restructure these. I think the way that I'm going to restructure it is I'm going to do skills projects near the top, and then experience and education should really just kind of be a footnote, especially since here it looks like you went to a boot camp and you didn't go to like a formal college. Now, if you're a graduate from Stanford or something with a computer science degree, you can push education up higher. But since your main form of education is boot camps, the honest truth is that no one's going to really care how well you did at a boot camp unless, you've got an in with them already. And then in that case, your resume probably doesn't matter too much. Okay, let's go through and break down each individual section for the resume. So first up, this education section, I think there's kind of this like anxiety with developers, especially newer ones, that they feel the need to like really fill out each section of their resume thoroughly, even when they don't have great things to put. So here, adding your high schools is very much so not required. I would recommend taking these off so that you can free up more space for more important things. I think it's really important to compress your resume to be as short as possible, and removing these parts of the education is a great way to do that. I think your community college experience is fine because you have some, actual development that came from the college experience, which is great. I also think the boot camp experience is fine to have on here too. I would put them up higher though and compress it more. Also, this doesn't matter. No one cares what your GPA was in high school, and just like it's just doesn't matter. And honestly, for the most part, if this was a college GPA too, so say this is a different resume, this is the resume of someone who's a computer science graduate, I think a lot of the times, even if it's your first job, your GPA doesn't matter that much either. So like even if you graduated, some really prestigious Ivy League school with an extremely high GPA, I still think employers are going to care more about your skill set. But certainly it's, in that condition, or in that case, not something bad to list. But here, like high school GPA is just absolutely leave it off. Okay, let's talk about experience. So the way that these sections are structured is really informal, and like you had something decent going here with like the date and locations that you were doing for education, and we just didn't continue it into the experience section. So you definitely want to be very explicit about when you were employed from and what you were doing. So teaching experience is pretty good. That's helpful. And then another temporary teacher's aid one, troubleshooting computers. This is definitely something you can twist into some more tech experience. I think it's important when you're looking through your experience section, and same for projects. We'll talk about this down here as well. But anytime you can kind of twist a role that you've done in the past to apply as much as possible to what you're searching for in the future, you should do that. So here, kind of buried in here is this troubleshooting computers part. And I would obviously reformat this whole thing, and that's what we're going to do in our rebuild. But I think it's important to highlight this part in particular because it's the part that would be most overlapping with any potential future roles that you're going to have. 5 different bookstore locations, categorized thousands of books. I mean, this is not that important. This is kind of like a skills, the way that this is structured is like a skills overlap with experience. Like you're outlining like a skill here and then like justifying the skill. I don't really like this. I think we'll change up this section a lot. Let's look at the project section as well, because I noticed something really interesting here that I want to talk about. So there's 3 projects here, and we're kind of like outlining what they are and then talking about what we built them in. So we've got this like TFT builder, and if you don't know, TFT is a auto chess game. So this is just like an app, I'm assuming, that lets you, try out different compositions and look at how they might work together. Using React, TypeScript, and Rails on the back end. Good stack. I think that you can structure this a lot better, for sure, to make it more easily readable. Like, what are the things that we care about the most here for recruiters? We care about the tech stack you use, React, TypeScript, and Rails. We care about the fact that you deployed it. The little description is nice, but I think you want to highlight these points more so than just like throwing them in a sentence is gonna do. The other thing I want to note here is that you deployed this thing, and I know a bit about TFT, so I know that this is something that you could deploy and get a domain name set up for, and set up an SSL cert, and maybe like post it on Reddit or something. I've talked about this in past videos, but I've had students before that have deployed projects and gotten, some actual users to use them, and this certainly seems right up that alley. For something that you could, actually deploy and get some people using. And then what I would recommend doing, especially if you're having trouble getting your foot in the door on your first job and you're just finding that your resume is not looking impressive enough, is that if you deploy this app, you can go ahead and form an LLC for fairly cheap, just a few $100s. And then you can like distribute this product as that LLC. And I want to note, this is not legal advice. I'd, talk to your lawyer, talk to someone who is a, professional in the legal realm. But, if you get your own little company behind this, you can really twist this project into professional experience, because it's something that's actually deployed and that people are using. So in my rebuild of this resume, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that you've done that. You've gone ahead and, spent a few $100s to found your own LLC, and you're distributing this as an actual deployed product from that LLC. And then we're going to spruce this up a lot, and we're going to add it under experience, actually, because it's like pretty practical, right? You've actually got an app deployed. And if you've got some user base on it, maybe you have some suggestions, some feedback, and these are all things that you can talk about, to potential employers. I know this might seem like I'm advising you to lie, but I'm not. It is valid experience that you've built and deployed an app. And remember what our goal is for our resume. We want to just get a call back, right? That's our goal. So we're trying to twist our resume as much as possible to get it into a state where a recruiter is likely to give us that call back and get us into our first interview. The fact of the matter is, people don't care that much about resumes once you're actually in the interview. And if you're someone with strong technical skills and a great soft skills and the ability to talk about yourself, then your resume just needs to get your foot in the door. And by twisting this into some more practical experience, you're going to get a lot more calls back, because just this completely empty experience section is going to be a big red flag. Portfolio created in React, deployed in S3. Again, I think for like these both will structure them better, certainly. And then the last section here is this skills section: HTML, TypeScript, CSS, Node, databases, Ruby on Rails, React. So it might feel tempting to try to make this section slim, and I can see that the person who originally created this resume fell into that pit hole. And the reason I can see that is like TypeScript's listed here, right? But there's no JavaScript. I'm assuming you didn't use raw React. Maybe you did, but you probably used some state management library like Redux or MobX. That should be here as well. Ruby on Rails is fine to combine into one because they're almost always together. But databases, this is too vague. Talk to me about what databases you've used. Have you done some Mongo? Have you done Postgres, etc.? And the reason I say that is you have to remember, for the most part, the people looking at your resume are going to be recruiters who are not very technical. And a lot of them know generally what these things are. You know, I've heard people say in the past that like, oh, recruiters don't know what they're talking about. A lot of them are going to at least know the basics. They're going to know that like React is a front-end framework. They're going to know what HTML is. But they might not know some more nuanced things. Like when they're hiring for a job that's a JavaScript job, they might not know that TypeScript also means you're knowledgeable about JavaScript as well, right? They might not know the difference between Node.js or like an EC2 node, for example. They might not know what if they're hiring for a job that's using a more obscure database, like maybe their job listing has like Amazon Aurora up there. They're not gonna know where the overlap is with this like databases section. It's too vague. So this is a section we're certainly gonna fill out more. Okay, I think that's good for an overview. Let's jump into our rebuild. Let's take a look at the revised resume that I have here for Johnny. So on the right, I've got the old resume that he had before, and on the left, I have my revised version. Now, I didn't make the revised version in Google Docs. I used a tool for it called Novo Resume that's tailor-made to make resumes. It's a tool I've been using for a few years now to build my own resumes, and honestly, I think it's really great. Some features are blocked behind a paywall. In fact, some of the features I'm using here are blocked behind a paywall, but the base of the application is more than enough to make a really great and effective resume. So it certainly has my stamp of approval. If you're looking for somewhere to build your resume, I would recommend Novo Resume. So let's go through and let's talk about what I've done. So first things first, just looking at the flow of the resume, there's a few things I immediately want to point out. The first is I've shrunk the resume to a single page. I talked a bit about how it's important to get your resume shorter. And what I meant by that is I think it's really important to get it into one page as much as you can, especially early in your career. When it's a bit later in your career and you have a ton of experience, it's naturally going to kind of overflow. But early in your career, compressing it to a single page is really, really useful. It's also useful if you end up going to any job fairs or anything like that in the future, because you can just give out these like single pages, right? The next thing I want to note is I changed up the flow of it. So now we've got this 2-column system. We've still got our title at the top, but it pops a little bit more. There's some color involved. It's not quite as boring. Using red here is no accident. I chose red because it's actually more of a maroon, I guess, But, if you're thinking about something like YouTube thumbnails, the goal of YouTube thumbnails are to stand out and to stick in your brain. And that's why a lot of the time you'll see a lot of YouTube thumbnails, including my own, that are using like red and yellow, right? It's no accident that signs that we're supposed to pay attention to, like stop signs, are red. Red tends to stick in the memory more than some other colors, so I've made the resume red as a result. Now, I want to know, I don't think this is the most important detail, but just getting some color in there to make yourself stand out more among other applicants is a great thing to do. The other thing that I've done just from a macro level here is I've restructured it. So we've got the two columns, like I said, but I've also moved stuff around. So the education, like I talked about, I've moved to the bottom. Work experience is at the top, and skills is also easily recognizable. And we're kind of really highlighting our skills, right? They're all wrapped in these boxes that make them really, really stand out. I also removed the address. So, no need to have this address. I've removed that as well. So let's go in section by section, and I want to talk a bit more about the decisions that I made. So first things first, in this header section, giving yourself a title I think is really important. I think that doing a more generalized title is a good idea. One of the reasons I like Nova Resume is that you can modify this pretty easily. So if I'm applying for a few different jobs, you can update this title to more accurately match the job you're going for. So for example, if you're going for maybe a React Native job, you could update this to be React Native software engineer, something that's maybe a bit more targeted. The other thing I wanted to point out here is this description section. So this can be a really good place to let some of your personality shine through. You want to keep it fairly short, no reason to dump your life story here, but I'll see a lot of the times people will use this section to do something just kind of boring, like a really quick professional description that they think sounds great. Like I've seen ones before that are like professional driven focused software engineer looking for work, which might sound great, but I think you're missing out on an opportunity here to let some personality shine through, which will make you stand out more. I'll show you what mine looks like after we go through this resume, because I think I have a really good tagline, but something that kind of stands out and gets people excited about you is what you're looking for. So I threw this one together really fast, but the only thing I love more than creating applications is doing it with incredible people. Something like this, if I read this on a resume, it would make me want to open a conversation with that applicant, certainly. Okay, let's dive in and talk about the work experience section. So work experience, if you remember on the previous resume over here on the right, we didn't have it very structured. There wasn't dates to it. So we've added those, and they're kind of arbitrary because I don't know when this person worked these roles. I've significantly shrinked down the resume or the experience that doesn't matter much, like the barista experience here, just stating that they did it. But I think, if we were to flesh this out more, it would push these things to the second page, which I think matters. I think it matters more to have your resume on a single page than to get detailed about this experience that does not apply very much to the new roles that you're looking for. I also took this temporary teacher's aide job and I fleshed it out a bit more. Instead of calling it, a temp teacher's aide, I said, you're a technical support and aide at that high school. And then what you were responsible for was helping students troubleshoot some technical issues, helping grade students, and then tutoring students in math and science, which was from this section here. I combined these into one. And, maybe the person, if I had the person who originally created this resume here, maybe these don't directly map into one thing, and maybe you have to change this up a little bit, but I wanted to highlight that you're tutoring students, and specifically math and science, because it's the part that applies the most to an engineering job. So I highlighted specifically that. Now, the other thing I did, and it's going to have us talking about the project section a little bit, is if we look down into this project section here, and compare it to the one on the previous resume, you'll notice that the TFT builder is missing. And that's because one of the things I suggested while we were looking through this resume was to form a more formal LLC, deploy the application, which apparently it already has been, but have the application deployed, get it a domain name, and have people actually using it. So here I have under work experience. You're a software engineer for that LLC you founded. I just made up a name for it, GG Software, but you can make up whatever name you want. You want it to sound as legitimate as possible. And then we're outlining our achievements. Now, this is something that you built alone, conceivably. Maybe it was a pair project and maybe you formed the LLC with a few of your colleagues, but let's imagine that this was something you built alone. The way I'm structuring these achievements and tasks does not make it obvious that this is your own solo company and you're building it alone. And that's not dishonest. It's just highlighting things that are most likely to get you a call back. When I was looking for my first engineering job, I spent a lot of time highlighting my experience in the past running a video game server. It's how I got started in tech. And although most of the work was solo, I did have a community that was helping out and stuff. And I made sure to structure it in a way that made it seem like I was working more so for a company rather than running the entire show. And the reason that I did that was just to make myself seem less green than other engineers applying for the job. I wanted to seem like I had a bit more experience under my belt. And to be completely honest, if you have something deployed that people are using, you do have more experience than a lot of the other junior engineers that'll be applying for roles. So I've got things that are highlighting stuff that recruiters would care about. So responsible for building out the MVP. We highlight the technical skills here, a separate note for infrastructure, and then another point that might be impressive, which is like user testing. So, you post it on Reddit, you ask for feedback, you got an initial group of testers, maybe you run some user testing and gather feedback. That's good experience and something that you would certainly want to bring up and talk about. Okay, let's talk more about the project section now that we have this TFT builder stuff out of the way and we've talked about how I've applied that into experience. I spruced it up, I made it formatted a bit better. No reason to outline dates here though. Talked about the different stacks that you're using. Add some impressive notes wherever you can. So like maybe you built out the entire application in 3 days and you collaborated with 2 other developers. Those are things that look good to potential employers. You have that collaboration experience. You build things quickly. That's all good. Portfolio app, same thing, outlining the tech used. And then the travel app, which was not initially listed here, but I'm just assuming that if this person went to a boot camp, they probably took some like exam-like project. And if that's the case, I think putting that on here is a good idea because you can, highlight some more specific things that you got out of your boot camp. Like I built this exam, in 1 day and finished it 2 hours early. You certainly want to just mention the positives here. So maybe you finished 2 hours early, but only got like an 8 out of 10 on it. Don't mention that you got an 8 out of 10. Just mention that you finished 2 hours early, right? Next up, let's talk about education here. So I've really reduced this education section. I removed the high schools completely like I talked about. I left in the college experience. I twisted it a little bit, so they went to community college. I don't know if they were pursuing a degree in comp sci or if they were just doing, some other classes and they had the option to take a programming class. But they took a programming class, so I have it listed as an associate's in computer science. If this is... if I was to give this back to the person that made this resume, they might have to adjust this a bit to be a little bit better representing of what they did. But you certainly want to get out here that you were studying comp sci. So I also went to a semester of college and I wasn't studying exactly comp sci. I was studying actually game development. But that one semester of college, I just have it listed as a semester of computer science because it's close enough. And again, my goal is to just get a call back. And I've never had a situation where I was talking about my college experience and someone was like, "Oh, so you weren't a computer science major," and then like wasn't interested in hiring me. You just want to make yourself seem as as approachable as possible for that role, and a computer science degree is something that would certainly help that. Then software development bootcamp certificate, maybe they have some special name for it. I would not recommend using the special name for it. Like if you went to a bootcamp, like for example, I used to teach at Coding Dojo. Coding Dojo had this thing called belt exams where at the end of each stack you would take an exam and then you were given like a belt based off of how well you did on the exam. So if you were to say you were a black belt in Rails here, that no one's going to know what that means, right? Don't put things that are specific to your boot camp here. Be as general as possible. You're certified in whatever stack from your boot camp. That's all I would list. So the last thing I want to talk about is skills. So if you remember before, my big call out here was that this section is a little too thin, and that there's an opportunity to expand on this a lot. So like, for example, this person just had TypeScript here, but we know that they also know JavaScript. So I have TypeScript and JavaScript listed. And again, that's just so that if a recruiter is looking for very specific keywords, we want them to find that on our resume. We've got Rails listed. Instead of just databases, I listed some actual databases, MongoDB and Postgres. Maybe you learned some other databases and you need to update that as you see fit. I don't just have React listed. I have React and Redux listed. I outlined some other stuff that I'm sure this person learned throughout their process, like Git, version control, GitHub, Unix command line, pair programming, TDD. You want to be as explicit as possible. It's better to overlist skills than underlist them because, again, you want to make sure that you seem like you have as much overlap as possible with the role you're applying for. You want to give that recruiter that's looking at your resume the confidence that you have the necessary skill set and experience to do a good job, and most importantly, to pass the interviews that they're going to task you with, right? Okay, so that is my take on a more effective junior software engineering resume. I want to take a moment and also look at my resume to give you some advice for maybe some more experienced engineers. Okay, so here's a look at what my latest revision of my own resume looks like. So some stuff I want to note here. I really want to highlight this tagline here because I think it's a good one. I've had a lot of success with it, but I just want to showcase that it's really good to show your passion and part of your personality in your resume. And I think that mine comes out here. So I fell in love with writing code as a kid and never stopped, powered by passion and a significantly higher caffeine consumption than the recommended daily value. It's fun. It talks about how passionate I am, and it's quick. I've had a lot of success with this tagline, and I've gotten a good amount of compliments on it from recruiters and hiring managers. Just some things that I want to point out that I actually don't think I'm doing super well. My photo here, from what I understand, statistically, it's worse to have a photo of yourself on your resume than not. I have one in here, and I've personally never had any issues with it. But, maybe it's a good idea to leave that out. I like the way it looks myself, but I would not recommend having one. The skills section that I have is really filled out. I could actually do quite a bit more, I think, now, but I didn't want it to take up like the entire resume. Kind of makes me sound like I'm pumping myself up. I've just toyed with a lot of technologies, and I think it's worth listing anything that you've spent, more than 5 to 10 hours on. It's worth listing because you have some familiarity with it, and you can certainly pick it up and use it professionally if needed. So I have some things on here that I would be lying if I said I was an absolute expert on, like CodeIgniter. I taught it to a group of students in the past, and I did it for a month, but I'm nowhere near as much of an expert on this as I am in like React, for example, or GraphQL. I've also got the funny note because, I'm funny. Then looking at the work experience here, I've really just kind of outlined the things that I think are most impressive for the kind of roles that I'm going for. So when I'm looking to apply for a new role, because as more of a senior engineer, when I'm going for a role, it's usually like one or two very specific ones. I'm rarely doing this like large breadth job search that you'll do early on in your career. So what I'll do is, like, say for example, I'm applying for maybe a teaching job. Then I'll modify some of my experience and titles to be, a bit more directed towards that. So maybe, instead of, if I'm doing teaching, instead of highlighting here as my first point that like I led the technology decisions for the company, maybe I would move up pair programs and mentors engineers daily. And like vice versa, if I'm going for a leadership position, maybe I would highlight, that's actually why this says head of engineering, is I was applying for some leadership position, a year back or something. And my actual title at Lesson was staff software engineer, but in terms of my actual responsibilities, I was very much so the head of engineering. Any large engineering decision went through me. I didn't technically have the title, but I put it on here because I felt like it was more representative of the actual work I was doing. So the main pieces of advice is, if you're a more experienced engineer, take the time to update your resume to tailor it more towards specific roles. Be more granular with your titles. My actual title at Amazon was software development engineer too, but I've gone ahead and I updated it to just, say software engineer, because no one really cares or knows what the different levels are at Amazon. And then I specified what I was doing most of, right? It applies a bit more. It's a bit more specific and more representative of the role that I filled at Amazon. Same thing with staff software engineer, head of engineering, like I discussed. This wasn't actually part of my title, but it's more representative of the role I was actually filling. Talk about this one last piece, which is, my initial experience on my resume, which is this like Minecraft server that I founded and kind of got me started in tech. So now on my resume, it says technical co-founder, but when I was first applying for jobs in the tech industry, back 7-8 years ago now, the way that I had this worded was not technical co-founder, it was software engineer. And I changed up some of the things. Like I was highlighting more that I programmed game modes and game features and web front-end features, and the managing a team, scaling the server, right? These are good points to highlight, but I changed the title to make it seem more relevant to the jobs that I was applying for. Thank you so much for watching the video. If it was helpful to you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Also, just a reminder that we have a new Discord server up and running. The link to join that is down below. Thank you again, and hope you have a wonderful day.